welcome to the 2024 Ohioana Book Festival. I'm Doug Dangler, and I'm pleased to welcome you to the panel called Comics for Kids, as apparently I'm still learning to read. And now I am pleased to welcome our authors, Annie Hunter Eriksen and Wes Molebash.
Hello.
So welcome.
Yep. Thank you.
Sure. And so that we're going to jump into some Q&A. I'll ask some questions, and then I'll ask you guys about questions that you have. So Annie Hunter Eriksen graduated from the College of Worcester in 2013 and claims she, quote, fell in love with this town whose number of livestock rivals that of its human population. She says she is driven purely by comics, coffee, and cats, which may explain the exhausted cats outside her house, and why she named her son after a superhero. And I guessed the name, so the rest of you will have to as well, except I think you were here for that, so you're out of contention. No cheating, yeah. On her website, she requests great podcasts, and in case anyone might know one, and because she is a committed distance runner, and she is forever running out of podcasts. So if you have recommendations for her, please let her know. Her most recent book is Along Came a Radioactive Spider, Strange, Steve Ditko, and the Creation of Spider-Man. Her website is aeriksen.com. Wes Molebash is the creator of several popular webcomics, most notably You'll Have That and Molebashed. He's also created cartoons for companies and organizations such as The Ohio State University, Target, and PBS Kids. Wes is the cartoonist of the graphic novel series Travis Daventhorpe for the Win, published by First Second Books. The second book in the series, Travis Daventhorpe Powers Up, was released on March 19th, 2024. So congratulations on that recent release. WesMolebash.com is his website. So let's get started. Cool. And Annie, can you please give us a brief description, a summary rather, of Along Came a Radioactive Spider, Strange Steve Ditko, and the Creation of Spider-Man, and an overview of how it came to be?
Sure. So when I was writing my first book, With Great Power, which is about Stan Lee, I kind of ran into wondering about Steve Ditko, who is the illustrator of Spider-Man, and why no one ever talked about him. And he's only just now kind of credited as the illustrator and co-creator. You'll notice now in the Marvel movies, they finally slapped his name up with Stan Lee. But my illustrator, Lee Gatlin, kind of brought him up when we were working on this one. And so after we finished that together, I was like, what if I just did a book about Steve Ditko? And it ended up being a real challenge because Steve never gave an interview, ever. I think maybe he gave one, but I couldn't find it. So if anyone has it, let me know. But I ended up writing that book, and I think Steve Ditko, if he were alive today, would absolutely hate it. So,
why do you think he would hate it?
He just didn't like a light on his personal life at all. He was very much had a strange relationship with his creation of Spider-Man. He made Spider-Man, and it blew up, and the popularity, I think, wasn't coexisting with his personality of being an introvert. So he kind of decided, I don't need this. And him and Marvel and Stan Lee got into a huge fight. Just reminds me of being 16 years old again, being a teenage girl, like all that trauma. And then he went off and just kind of, his career petered out. And he did a couple other things and got really obsessed with Ayn Rand. So was very obscure for the rest of his life, but he left behind Spider-Man, and I think it kind of haunted him. But yeah, so that's how it came to be. It was very interesting to write, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wes, can you please give us a brief summary of Travis Daventhorpe Powers Up and an overview of how that came to be?
Yeah, so the series starts with Travis Daventhorpe for the Win, and it's about this kid, Travis Daventhorpe. He's this 11-year-old. He's supposed to be in 6th grade. They bump him up to 7th because he's super smart. He can make robots and stuff. And kind of a socially awkward kid, doesn't have a lot of friends. And one day he finds this sword and learns that he's the legendary hero of a kingdom in another dimension. And he has to learn how to fill those shoes, and he is not good at it. But he makes some friends along the way that help him out. So Travis Daventhorpe for the Win kind of sets that up, and then in Powers Up, he starts to, that's when I like to say it gets real. And he really starts to come into his own. You start to get the conspiracy that he's trying to uncover starts to show through. And it's setting up I'm working on the third book now. It will complete the trilogy. It's called Travis Davenport Gets a Life, and it'll be out next year if I can get it done.
Okay. It's funny. When I first got this, they asked me to do this. I was looking at the description, and I thought, well, they both have heroes who are sort of reluctant heroes, right?
Yeah.
Spider-Man he gets bitten by a radioactive spider and is a reluctant superhero, and they find the sword, sort of maybe not as reluctant sort of superhero. But what attracts you to that hero's journey? Is that something that you've considered about, the topics that you're working on, because they are heroic? I mean, Steve Ditko's creation was more heroic, really, than Steve Ditko. But
I've always been interested in the underdog story, which is exactly what Peter Parker is. He's an underdog whose superpowers make his life even worse, which is really fascinating. Like X-Men, that's how I kind of got hooked on comics. You have a bunch of outcasts who are shunned by society, but they still end up doing the right thing. So I kind of like the idea of if everyone will still hate you, will you still do the right thing? I like that idea. And Peter Parker rises up to the occasion. Steve Ditko is he's kind of a weird hero on his own, too. I mean, if you think about it, he created this hero and he didn't want to stop creating. So he just didn't know what to do with his fame. So it was just a lifelong grappling for him. And I think his heroism is in the fact that he never stopped believing in his philosophy, even as weird and divisive as it was. So, yeah.
I echo a lot of Annie's sentiments. I've always loved the hero's journey and that trope, even though I think, there's some people who think it's pretty tired, but I think it resonates still because I think we've all felt that way. The unlikely hero, the feeling of rejection, and we identify with that, and there's like a hope in it. Like, if this guy can be a hero or this girl can be a hero, maybe I can be a hero or whatever. And I don't know. I think about my favorite stories like Lord of the Rings. You've got Frodo, who is a meek hobbit who has this huge task before him. And then I'm a huge Matrix fan, the first one especially. And that whole movie is Neo the one or not? I mean, there's signs that he is, there's signs that he's not, and it goes right to the very end is when spoiler alert, you find out that he is the one, but it takes you that whole movie to get there. And I don't know, it's just all those stories, all those journeys, I think are very powerful. And there's just all these fun new ways to tell the same story, but do it in a fresh way.
Mm-hmm. So Annie mentioned with great power, the marvelous Stan Lee. What got you interested in writing a book about Stan Lee? I mean, there's been a lot written about him, but what personally interested you in that aspect?
This is going to sound really weird, but as a 16-year-old girl, I could really relate to Stan Lee, who was in his 60s. I just was such a fangirl of him, and being a teenager in high school and being a girl, liking comics was just not a thing. So I love the X-Men, and I'm like, Stan Lee made this, and I'd Google him all the time, read his Wikipedia page, and I was just really interested in him. He was not afraid to be weird. So I wanted to write a book about him. And we actually had the same birthdays, which is a humble brag.
Well, I think it's great that you went out of your way to arrange that because you knew, what time, when that was going to be necessary. I'm curious about something you said there. He wasn't afraid to be weird. What aspect are you responding to that was weird about it? Because you also described Steve Ditko as strange, right?
Yes. I didn't think about it. They were both big weirdos. Stan would come into the office and play an ocarina and annoy the crap out of everybody.
An ocarina is a mouth?
Yeah, it's like a mouth instrument, like a condensed flute, I guess. Anyone who's played Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, would know exactly what it is.
Sorry, I never played that. I was vaguely remembering an ocarina as something you would do. Okay, so that's odd and annoying in a work partner.
Yes, exactly. I totally forget my point. I'm thinking about ocarinas now.
Oh, you were talking about Stan. His weirdness was
Yes.
the ocarina and Steve's.
Thank you. Yeah, Steve was just reading Atlas Shrugged in the corner and refusing to talk to anybody. So they're both unafraid of being themselves.
Okay.
And, it worked for Stan, didn't really work for Steve. So, but I mean, they both taught me that, you can't be afraid to just be yourself. I know that sounds really elementary, but it's true.
So if they taught you that, how is that coming out in your life? Did that give you sort of the idea that, hey, if these guys were strange, and as you had mentioned, it's not as common for women to be interested in comics?
Yeah.
Which I think is a tragedy, really, or
Yes.
unfortunate.
It's
because
changing
yeah.
now. Yeah. But yeah, it really forced my family and friends to accept me. Put up with all my nerd talk, so
Okay.
it worked out.
Excellent. All right. Wes, tell me about drawing cartoons for corporations. That's something else you've done in addition to Travis Daventhorpe. And I read that on your bio and thought, well, that's really interesting because I've seen a lot of corporate illustrations, but I've never thought about the difference between writing something like this where you have free reign versus somebody comes to you from the Ohio State University, Target, or PBS Kids and says, we need this, and how much individuality, how much of yourself can you bring to something that role?
First off, it's nowhere near as fun as making your own graphic novel.
Assume.
All three gigs were very different from each other. So Ohio State University gig, I did a big project for the agricultural sciences department. And it was basically like, when you go to the beach and they have those, like the muscle guy with the head cut out and you stick your hand in there and they take your picture. So they had me draw a character that represented every major. There's like 20 majors just through that department. So I had to depict every major and had to make it a certain, that was what was tedious about it. It was, they didn't critique my art, but they critiqued the size and making sure that I really had, it was very meticulous because I did not draw it at the actual size. I had to draw it on I actually put two 11 by 17 pieces of paper together and then had to scan it in pieces at 1200 DPI. And this was back in the mid 2000s, and my scanner was really slow, and then I had to piece it together. It was a slog. But I got paid well for it. And then the Target project was much smaller. It actually did not end well. It was a thing where I was not chosen to participate so what they were doing was they were putting a lookbook together, and they
What's
wanted
a lookbook?
So my sister worked for Target. She's her major is in fashion design and marketing. She had a big job at Target, and they put together, I don't quite understand what, as she told me, is like a lookbook. It's like all the stuff they're working on, and they're showing it to vendors and stuff, and they might not have the actual piece made, so you can't take a picture of it, but what they can give you is like an idea, and you draw it. Okay. And she wanted to do something with the kids section that was kind of cartoony. And her team was like, no way. And she was like, I'm the boss, we're going to try it. So she had me draw a couple, and I was very proud of them. They ultimately did not use it, and she was very sorry, but I said, can I still use Target as a credit? And she goes, absolutely. So I put Target on my resume. Okay. And then PBS Kids was a fun gig. That was where I did sketch notes. If you've ever seen people do sketch notes, I think Mike Rohde is the guy's kind of popularized that. But I went to 4 different cities with PBS Kids, and they had a corporate team building thing, and I drew notes the whole weekend. And that was a lot of fun. So 3 different gigs, 3 different styles. I had a lot of fun with both. They certainly had their limitations. I got pretty exhausted by the end of them, and I much prefer making graphic novels.
Okay.
Yep.
I want to be credited for not saying that you missed the target. Because that would be wrong, and I'm not like that. But Annie, I want to come back to something you wrote. You said with the marvelous Stan Lee, because Stan Lee was really well known for his cameos in the movies. And if you could make a cameo in any Marvel film like Stan Lee, which one would it be?
Well, I love Spider-Man. and Tom Holland is my favorite Spider-Man. So I'd probably be in one of his movies as some kind of helpless pedestrian almost being run over by a car. So maybe he swings to save me. But,
So instead of being another spider person like Gwen, you're going to be helpless pedestrian 1. That's your role.
I don't think I have the chops to be a spider lady.
Okay. Which movie? So I'm assuming then your spider, I'm assuming that the character of your choice then is Spider-Man. By the way, like if you were going to be a cartoon character.
Yes, it's between Spider-Man and Miss Marvel are my top 2 favorites.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And it is sort of on the similar thing. How much of you is in Travis Daventhorpe, and how much is pure invention?
It's like 50-50. I think when you're drawing or writing, you pull on your own experiences, right? So I pulled a lot on. I was a pretty insecure kid in middle school, and so I kind of pull on that, try to tap into those feelings to kind of set up, Travis as a sort of ne'er-do-well, awkward kid, Mm-hmm. I'd never found a sword in the woods that said I was a legendary hero, but I dreamed of that. I was a big daydreamer.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember sitting in class and the teacher talking and not hearing a word they said because I was Batman for a while, you know what I mean? And so that's a lot of those kind of stories I even came up with in my head as a child. They kind of come out in these stories. So, yeah.
Do you find yourself daydreaming while you're working on the book and thinking, I could be an account executive?
Certain parts of it.
Okay.
Obviously, writing is you need to daydream during writing, especially the brainstorm phase, which is a very exciting part. And then there are parts that are they're fun, but they're mindless, like inking. For me, I'm a tight penciler. So for those of you who don't know comic parlance, it's when you draw and pencil almost exactly what you want to ink. Some people are loose pencilers. They just kind of sketch it out and they do most of the work inking. I don't trust my inking skills enough to do that, even though I draw entirely digitally now and I can erase that stuff. So by the time I get to inking, it's kind of, I don't want to say totally mindless, but I can listen to a podcast or think about other things while I'm doing that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's times for daydreaming and there's times for focusing.
Okay. So there was a question I wanted to ask, so I'll just go to that. The difference between, or your movement from what I assume as you were starting out was hand-drawn and now to computers.
Yeah.
How much has that changed what you do for a book like Travis Daventhorpe?
It's working digitally is like necessary with the dumb deadlines that you have.
Dumb meaning they're fast.
They're very fast, and like they even know when they're telling you the deadline. They're like, we need this by, and it's like, okay, well, we'll see. But it has streamlined the process a ton. I will say I am one of those people who I don't think digital art looks as good as traditional. I think it's getting closer and closer all the time, and it does kind of amaze me. I have a lot of fun drawing on my iPad, and it's so portable, and I can. Some of my most productive drawing is while my son's in soccer practice, and I'm just sitting in the car waiting for him. I couldn't do that if I was working traditionally. I mean, I could, but I'd be making a mess with my ink spilling everywhere, and that just wouldn't be conducive to my wife's car.
Take a risk.
Right.
You know, it's not your car.
Right. But yeah, like it's become a necessary thing, but it's fun enough to draw, and I don't hate it. But there are times where, there's a certain kind of line I can get from my traditional tools that you just can't get with a digital tool, and I miss that sometimes.
I'm curious about, I'm not a drawer.
Yeah.
And when you say there's a kind of line that you can get
Yeah.
with traditional that you can't get, is it the sort of the imperfections of the analog, or what is it?
I think that's a lot of it. So my favorite artists are like Bill Watterson, Calvin Hobbes, who had this very, he's a guy who did not type pencil. He loosely sketched and did all the artwork in ink. And he just had there was just energy in it. He used a brush. He would use sticks from the yard. And he'd get these big, fat, thick lines, and they'd be scratchy, and there would be imperfections, and the imperfections made it. Sometimes with digital art, it looks too perfect. And I actually do things like, I had a person the other day, I was talking about how I did in the second book, I drew 30 like he has to fight 30 robot velociraptors, and I'm mad at myself. I was mad at myself for making 30 because I had to draw 30 all the time. And someone said, "Can't you just copy and paste?" And I said, "Yeah, I could, but then it would look copy and pasted." And I wanted, even though I'm working digitally, I still want there to be an organic feel to it that I think, I don't know, as a person who appreciates comics, that appeals to me more than perfect, beautiful lines all the time. So yeah, that's kind of a long way to kind of explain that.
I like that explanation, and that tells me that in your third book there will be one Velociraptor robot.
It's a really short book, and
he fights a massive fog.
Yeah,
it just rolls in, obscures everything, and at the end you see him standing over the vanquish.
So, it'll be good, though. It'll be good.
It'll be incredible. And so one of the things that I want to be able to do is to ask you guys, what questions do you have for our authors, Comics for Kids? What have you always wanted to know about these sorts of books when you're reading them and you're coming to understand their stories?
Yeah, the question to mind.
Sure. Go ahead.
So Annie, I think it's really interesting that you're focusing on the people who created the hero. So where do you see your next books? Like, will you continue to focus around Spider-Man, or will you look at some of those other creators that assisted maybe with Stan Lee, like with the X-Men or with some of Miss Marvel?
Yeah.
So where do you see your next set of books going?
That's a great question. I wanted to do a 3-book entry into the world, and my last guy I wanted to tackle was Jack Kirby, who I'm not sure if he's got a kid's book about him yet. He does have a graphic novel or two, but he would be really fun for me to take on. So yeah, that would be my next one, I think. Yeah, that's great.
And I actually have a second question, if you don't mind. How was your West? So you have a lot of corporate gigs. So did you start, I guess, how did you start this path? Like, were you doing corporate gigs and you're like, no, I would enjoy doing, children's books? Or were you already thinking the children's book author path and then the corporate gigs were just kind of supplemental?
It's, so my love has always been comics. My dream was to be a newspaper cartoonist. And I, in the early 2000s, in my early 20s, that was what I was pursuing. But the newspaper business was drying up, and they weren't buying comics anymore. So then I found web comics, and I was doing web comics, and I got a nice following that way. People in my community knew that I was doing that. And what happened was I had this comic strip that was popular, and I wasn't getting any money from it, but people would be like, "Hey, would you draw this for me?" And I was getting money from that. So that's where a lot of those gigs came from. The Ohio State gig came from a guy I know in town who was a graphic designer there. And he's like, "Hey, we need an illustrator for this thing," and that's how I got in there. The Target thing happened because my sister worked there. The PBS Kids thing happened because I was doing like my own little notes. I was having fun with it just for me, and found that there was like this website of people who like do this for like a living, and I thought, well, I'll try that. So I put my name on this website, and PBS found me through that. So like comics has always been the foundation, and everything else has just has come from that. The graphic novel, I actually put the graphic novel off for a long time. When I originally pitched Travis, it was as a picture book, and then it became a chapter book, like an illustrated chapter book. I was basically trying not to make a graphic novel because the graphic novels, they're hard to make, and finally bit the bullet and adapted it to a graphic novel, and then that's what got me a publishing deal.
Is the graphic novel hard to make because you're doing the story as well? I mean, because I guess like the difference between the the two books that we've got here, you know, that's a historical research thing, and this is fiction. Was the fiction the part that you found harder to work on?
Putting the story together, that comes together pretty fast, because it's all up here, and it's just working with my editor, and that takes a couple months, and we've got a pretty good tight story. What takes a long time is drawing it. And, you know, it took me, for this book right here, this one, the second book, was pretty much from scratch. I didn't have the outline written yet, so I just had the idea. I went from idea to finished project in about 15, 16 months, and they want a book a year, and it's hard to do. And so this third one's been taking a lot longer because the first book came out, and I've been doing promo and all that stuff, and that has really cut into my time to draw. But all of it's important, all of it's fun, and it's a constant learning experience, yeah. And just learning your limits and learning how to figure it out.
So I mentioned this before, and we didn't come back to it. You named your son after a superhero.
Yes.
And I wanted to come back around before I forget that. We figured it out. Now it's your turn. The clue was not Marvel.
So I was
So
going to say Peter.
That was up there. I have a Peter in my family, so I didn't want to get it all confused. No, but I like that.
That's a good one. Can I say he's not far off? He's like in the realm.
Yes. Yep, in the realm.
Bruce.
Yes.
There it is. There it is.
Yeah.
So I assume you're a Batman fan as well.
Yeah, I'm a huge Batman.
So is there going to be a Bill Finger book?
I thought about it, but so my publisher, Page Street Kids, they told me after I finished the second one, they're like, we're not super interested in doing kids books anymore, just so you know. And I'm like, well, that's fine. I don't want to get another one published anyway. But if I have an agent, so when we find a new home, I'll see if I can
You will.
crank out a Jack Kirby and maybe a Bill Finger.
That would be fun. That would be good.
he's the one that came up with Batman?
Yeah, that was not getting. I'm sorry. You tell the story.
But no, I haven't done the research for it, so you go.
So Bob Kane is the guy who has been we know as the creator of Batman, but Bill Finger was very much involved with a lot of the universe, the villains, even aspects, I believe, of Batman's character. But Bob Kane he took all the credit, and Bill Finger kind of got kicked to the curb. And it's only been in the last few years, I think his family has really fought for him to have.
Yeah.
And it's kind of it reminds me of Steve Ditko in a way,
No.
where I think it was the Batman versus Superman movie. That was the first time Bill Finger got his name as a credit for being a creator of Batman. So it's an interesting story. There's a documentary on, I think, Hulu about it, and it's really fascinating if you're interested in that stuff.
So as an illustrator, do you look at things like that as cautionary tales and
Sure.
say, you know, maybe I don't want to go into that kind of comics?
I think it's a lot better now because of the junk that Jack Kirby was not compensated the way he should be compensated. I mean, that guy worked ungodly hours. He drew just about every one of those books, and created so many great characters, and he did not get the compensation he deserved. Same with Bill Finger, and a lot of those guys took the lumps so that my generation were able to fight more in our contracts. We're able to get. I mean, the money could still be a lot better, but it's better today than it was then. We get to retain the rights to our stuff a lot more, have more say in that, like licensing and all that, and it's because of the crap these guys had to go through before us.
And with you working online with like webcomics, do those, you said at least at first you weren't getting paid. Is that something that's changed now, that there's money to be made in webcomics?
There is, but it changes all the time because the internet now is so different than the internet when I was making webcomics, like exclusively. You know, back in the early 2000s, it was still good to have your own website and you could put ads on the website, and it was, you know, I had that figured out, and I was making a little bit of money from the ads, and I was pumping that back into the cartoon. But now everything is social media driven. People aren't going to websites. They're going to Instagram, they're going to TikTok, and it's just becoming harder and harder. And now you got these algorithms that you got to compete with. So just because you're putting it out there, there's no guarantee that anyone's seeing it. We're just as artists, we're very beholden to the whims of the social media culture right now. And I don't know if it's starting to shift back. I don't know. But time will tell. It'll be interesting.
You asked me at the beginning how long I've been podcasting. I think I'm entering into like my 14th year. I've made $42.
Yeah.
So I don't want to brag about all of that money. That sweet, sweet money. I have been. My children have. I've always been impressed with that $42, which came from a talk I gave. It wasn't. So yeah, the internet. Some people make money, but I can see it being very challenging.
I think it's. I've learned, like we're a certain breed, as creative people, and we will. We're taken advantage of because I think the businesses, the publishers, the podcast publishers, the internet publishers, all of them, they know at the end of the day we just want to make what we want to make, and and so we'll take bad deals. We'll do things that aren't maybe in our best interests in order to build. It's the whole do this for exposure kind of thing.
Yes.
And we're just slowly starting to move away from that, but not fast enough.
Okay. So to be more upbeat, there was one other question. Yes. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I had a quick question about your process. Do you write your stories first and then you do your illustrations?
So you worked with the illustrator, right?
Yes, I did.
So did you write and then hand that to the illustrator? How collaborative was that?
It was. I wrote the skeleton draft of it, and I put in illustrator notes, and I was very much like, you just do whatever you want because I'm going to be happy no
Your
matter.
illustrations are great.
He did a great job. So Lee, he did need me to put in some notes of some things because he's like, I'm not really sure what you mean by this. So, but it was very much, I gave him free reign on everything. It was like,
you're a dream person to work with as an illustrator.
I'm also a textbook people pleaser,
Yeah.
so that also helps.
For me, the writing comes first. So from the concept, I draw until I get a character I think would be fun to draw, and then my mind starts putting story together. But when it comes to time to get the work done, writing first, and then I kind of figure out how I want to lay out the pages, and that's all through text, and like I'm typing in Google Docs, and then we start the drawing process. So
When you say fun to draw, what attracts you? What was fun about the characters? He's got an unusual hairstyle here. Of course, for me, everybody's got an unusual hairstyle. But he's got sort of a fun look to him. But
Yeah.
what was it that moment that said, "Hey, this is the character I want to draw for the foreseeable future"?
When I was young and I was, learning as much as I could about drawing comics, a piece of advice that kept getting, it didn't matter if what cartoonist or what book I was reading about how to draw cartoons, a common piece of advice was make sure the character is not something you're going to hate drawing after the 100th, 500,000th time you got to draw it. You're going to draw this character a lot, so you want to make sure. So it's that balance of making a character that's fun looking, fun to draw, dynamic, but not so detailed and complex that you're just going to loathe having to draw it all the time. Kind of like I did with the 30 Velociborgs.
I was going to say, will you draw any more robots?
I am done with those for now.
They will never appear.
They were fun to draw for a little while, and then it does get a little tedious. But with Travis, like with my main characters and his friends, I wanted them to have a distinct look. But I gave them like certain wardrobe. That's like their signature wardrobe. And I just made sure as I was testing these characters out that, the little details I added I kept it simple. I kept it as simple as I could, while also trying to make what I hope are kind of iconic looking silhouettes for these characters.
Okay. We had one other question, I think, the lady in the green.
Yeah, I wanted to know what is the biggest challenge to you for writing comics specifically for children?
Well, when I signed up to do a children's picture book, I just really wanted to write a story about Stan Lee. So I didn't cater any of what I've written to kids. And this was before I had my son, so I didn't know anything about children. I was like, I'm just going to write a book that's fun. And they never asked me to change my language or anything like that. Maybe just because I have a childlike personality, it ended up working out. So, yeah, but I think the hardest part now is when people come up to me and ask me what age group these books are for. I have no idea. I mean, I'm maybe 8 years old. Beats me.
Yeah.
Anyone who likes Spider-Man, I guess, would be appropriate. So, yeah, you probably have a way better answer than that.
No, it's the same as yours.
Okay.
Like, I have not really encountered any challenges. I feel like I'm using my voice. When I'm writing a story I want to read, and I kind of know, working with kids books, you kind of know what you can and can't do, and my personality is like I don't really want to do the things I can and can't do. There was one question I asked my editor, and I knew the answer was going to be no, but I thought I'm going to ask anyway. I have this wizard character who's very much like a Gandalf type character, and there's this part in book 2 where he and Travis are having this little talk back and forth, kind of processing some stuff, and I wanted to have the wizard smoking a pipe. And I was like, they're not going to let that fly. But I asked, and they're like, no, you can't do that. So
Gandalf smoked a
but
pipe.
Gandalf smoked
All
a
the
pipe, and
hobbits
all those,
smoked
yeah, and we celebrate that as children's literature. But that was fine, I guess, in the '60s, I guess. But yeah, I've not really encountered any challenge. Like, if are you interested in doing children's?
I'm an illustrator, I'm a writer, I'm always screen and Freddie goes together, and she's comic illustrator specifically, so
Yeah.
that's a big interest.
So I would just encourage you. Yeah, I would just encourage you to write what you want to write, and you probably know the boundaries. You know them, and you're probably, if you have interested. That has been a challenge. I have had my hands slapped. So
So the question was condensed?
these books are too,
Or they're too long? Okay.
one of the reasons I didn't want to do graphic novels because I didn't think I could do 180 pages. These are both 288. And this was going to be over 300, and my publisher's like, you got to cut some of this out. And we did. And then the third one is going to be 288. It'll match. But my fourth one, I'm already going to be like, I'll stick to 220. I'll try to keep it around there. But yeah, I think there is a best practice. I just read that the Diary of a Wimpy Kid guy, Jeff Kinney, he keeps all of his books at this is an odd number, but he says he keeps them all at 217 pages. That's like the sweet spot, and it keeps all the books looking the same on the shelf. And I thought, that's clever. I think I'm going to take that advice.
That is the first time I've ever heard of anybody writing a book and saying, I want them to look the same. That's fascinating.
There is a business to it, and I'm learning that all the time. There's the art, and the art is important, but the business part is unfortunately probably more important. And
That's what surprises me about you guys having some ambiguity about the age range, because I would assume that publishers have very specific age ranges, and
They
they're
do.
like, this is what we want for this age group, and I'm surprised that they didn't say this is your age span.
I bet if you go on Amazon, it'll say.
Yes, I
I don't
assume.
even remember what
Yeah.
it says, but it
Okay.
is listed as something or other.
Okay, all right. Any other audience questions? Yes, sir.
Dealing with agents, simple, like
Yeah.
from agents, what's the pluses and minuses of what you should be?
I love the fact that you may not hear this on the podcast, but there's a child crying right as you ask that question.
It's foreboding.
You can hear it.
Agents are great in that they will. So I got to sign a new contract just recently, just last week, for an illustration job. And thanks to my agent, I got more money than they had initially offered. There's just things like that. When I got my contract for Travis, I had signed contracts before. They're like one page. The contract from First Second was 30 pages. And when I finally saw it, it was after she had already gone through it and said, this is ready for you to sign if you approve. And there was so much junk redacted that I never would have known to ask about it. So you've got this person that's fighting for you. But they also will tell you when it's time to put your big boy pants on and quit. I've had a couple things where I've kind of been fighting for certain things and I wasn't getting my way, and my agent has had to kind of put me in my place. She does fight for me, but she will tell me when I'm being a diva. And if that's something you don't like, being put in your place, then you get ready. But that's probably, I don't have a whole lot of negative to say. It's been a good experience.
I love my agent. I got very lucky with meeting her. I didn't have an agent for my first book, and I did not like that experience. There's things that are being asked of me that I didn't feel comfortable doing. Like the title was a big fight for me. They didn't think that With Great Power made sense, and I'm like, well, maybe you are. Wow.
You've never read Spider-Man, apparently.
Yeah, you have not done anything with Marvel then. So I went through that rigmarole, and I decided for book 2, I'm like, I'm going to get an agent. And my sister works in the industry as a editor, so she was able to recommend Jenny, my agent, to me, and she's just a rock star. I mean, I have such a fun time working with her, and she's like, no pressure on writing whatever you want to write next. I'm not on a timeline or anything. So I'll send this video to her to tell her I'm working on something. I promise, Jenny. But yeah, it's been a blast.
Yeah.
So kind of follow up to that, how do you pick your agent? I mean, so you actually had a personal connection who could connect you with someone. So you trust that person, that she's going to connect you with someone who's reputable. How did you find your agent? Was it something similar, or did you Google someone? Or
I
Facebook
used the
locally?
internet. I was sharing with this gentleman earlier, and it's called querytracker.com or .net. I can't remember the suffix, but it's basically a database of agents, and you can go on there and say, this is the kind of book I'm making, and the genre, like sci-fi or whatever it is, and you hit enter, and it sends you all these agents that represent that kind of thing, and then you can go and click on it. It's a time-consuming, but it's a great resource. It cuts a lot of the guesswork out, and you just kind of go to their websites and you see if this would be a good match. Sometimes they're not even accepting submissions right now. But the website is great at helping you find people to submit to, but also keep track of who you've submitted to, where you're at in the pipeline. And Query Tracker, QUERY Tracker. .com or .net, I can never remember, and it's free. Last time I used it was free. There was a premium version that was a nominal cost that actually has some features that would be additionally helpful, but the free version does a lot as well. .net, thank you.
Hey.
Confirmed. The agent kind of works as the lawyer, so and so my agent, and here's some other things that my agent has, and I'm sure yours has too. So my agent has a film agent that she works with. So when someone gets a hold of me, and which is exciting to say that has happened, that wants to develop the story into a TV show or movie, there is a film person that is part of that process, that they're the ones that look at the contract and make sure I'm not getting, the worst deal possible. So there's all of these, you look at the commission they make is like 15% of what you get from your contract, and it really is worth the money. And I am really glad that I have representation, and it just makes the whole process feel a little safer. And it gets your foot in the door, because a lot of publishers won't even look at you unless you have an agent. So
Right.
So everybody, when you leave here today, get an agent.
Do it.
Yes.
And then, let them know. Any final questions in the last 2 minutes?
So for your book, Dummy, for with Grassroots Novel, you don't complete the whole.
No, thank God.
Just like sketches.
So great question. To get my agent, I did the first 30 pages just in pencils, and then I chose a couple pages to finish. I think it was like I did a spread, like a double page spread, and then I think I did like a single page of panels just so they could see what a couple finished pages would look like. And what I've found is people, like my editors are great at just filling in the blanks visually. Like I don't have to spell it out perfectly, especially when we're brainstorming and stuff still. It's been very, very beneficial. My agent's been the same way. When we went to pitch, when I landed the agent and we went to pitch to the publishers, she helped me make my pitch way more polished. So what we pitched to the publishers looked way cooler than what I pitched to my agent. And we did end up taking that 30-page that I pitched to the agent. I ended up finishing all of them. And but there was still 250 pages yet to do. So no, you don't do what I gave them was the first 30 pages and then like a really detailed outline of the whole story. So yeah.
Okay. So thanks again to our panelists, Annie Hunter Eriksen and Wes Molebash. Thank you.
Thank you.